Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to this edition of Policy Matters here on Intellectual Radio. You can tune in each Monday at 6 p.m. on iHeart, Intellectual Radio, or view us live via Facebook Live. Today we have a very interesting guest, a dear friend of mine who has been at the show before. His name is Mr. Aaron Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein is currently a Cook County public defender.
Correct.
He has very extensive knowledge in the public defender's office. He also knows the political process. He was able to be the 32nd Ward? 33rd Ward committeeman to unseat a popular machine politician. So I think we'll have a very spirited conversation, and we're going to jump right in it. We'll let Aaron introduce himself, give us a little bit about his resume, and we'll go right into the topic.
How y'all doing? Thanks for having me. I think you said it a lot. I've been an attorney now for coming close to 18 years. I was with the public defender's office for about 6-7 years. Then I was in private practice for another 7 years. I'm now back as a supervisor with the office. Ran a few races. Recently ran for attorney general, unsuccessfully. But we raise the issues that are most important. Which are, criminal justice reform and fighting corruption and seeing the connection between the two. I remember the last time you were on, I was on with you. You were talking about what is corruption. It's not as simple as taking money under the table, which is, bribery. We understand that. But what about corrupt systems? And that's what I like to attack and talk about. We have a corrupt criminal justice system. We have a corrupt political system. We have a corrupt system throughout our society, and those are the issues I want to bring to bear and actually make change.
Great. One of the things made me think about this is because there is this documentary that's on Netflix. It's Kalia Bauer story. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with it? Where this young man was 15 years old, got charged with stealing a backpack, and he was held at Rikers Island for, I think, about 1,000 days, and over 600 of those days was spent in solitary confinement. Yeah. A shocking case.
And then he committed suicide, right?
No, he's still living, but
who's the one who committed suicide?
I think this was another case. Sorry. Me and my wife was discussing this last night because we was watching part of it, and he was telling his story, and he was going into the process of how the criminal justice system was just so tainted. And I was explaining to my wife, it's tainted there and it's tainted here. The things we saw in that documentary is the same things that we see on a daily basis going in the Cook County jail system. Overburden the cases, a slow process to, getting the cases seen in front of a judge, mental health services, all those things, talk about some of the things that you've seen that the system is flawed.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unwrap there because with all things, you have to start with history. And the reality is the criminal justice system evolves from slavery. People say, stop talking about slavery, stop it. But we need to know where we came from to get where we're at right now. So when slavery ended, the slave owners and the white power society needed to figure out a way to continue slavery. And while we think slavery ended with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, the reality is that the form just changed. And for another 100 years, you had a certain form of slavery. You had sharecropping, which was in essence slavery. As sharecropping went away, you had the criminal justice system evolve to become the new slavery. And the theory basically is you incarcerate folks, you give them a particular reason to be incarcerated, and then you work them. And that becomes a new slavery. If you look at the 13th Amendment, it specifically excludes people who are being punished for a crime. And while I do really like the Thaddeus Stevens of the world and the Charles Sumners, the ones that were the architect of the 13th Amendment, unfortunately, I think they probably knew what they were doing when they excluded criminal justice as in essence, a form of slavery that was exempted from the 13th Amendment. So as the world evolved, as our society evolved, we never reconciled the oppression of slaves and former slaves. We continued slavery. And that's what we have today. It's a form of slavery. I teach criminal law, and when I show my students, if you look like 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you look at a criminal law book, it was about yay big, about an inch thick. It's like 3 or 4 inches thick. Why do we have so many laws on the books? Because as stuff expands, we need to incarcerate more people. So that's the abridged version of how we got there. There are some things like you mentioned, like the efficiency of cases. That's a double-edged sword, because let's say I represent someone in a case, and it's a very serious case. The reality is, sometimes from a defendant's perspective, you don't want that case to go fast. You think of all the people who were exonerated. They were exonerated because of DNA, or because eyewitnesses came out of nowhere, or because eyewitnesses flipped, that type of thing. That happened over time. So if you're forcing me to trial to go in 3 months or 6 months or even 9 months on a DNA case, on a fingerprint case, on a case that really needs to be worked up, you're actually doing a disadvantage to the criminal defendant. So I think we always have to be cautious when we talk about efficiency and getting to trial quickly. That being said, there are people to this day that are languishing in jail waiting for trial on simple cases that should be disposed of real quick. My thing is, why are we arresting these people? Why do we keep charging these people? From our political crooks to our corporate criminals that never get charged, to someone who steals a Snickers bar, and somehow they're in the criminal justice system.
And one of the things that I admire about you, because you get it. Mm-hmm. You get it. Out the gate, you said slavery. It's very simple. If you look at the population of most jails in America, the vast majority are minorities.
Oh, it's not even close.
And
per capita, it's not even close. Yeah.
You think about this, a little bit about, I've been in there. And one, do not see very few. I don't know. I think they got a different jail. You don't see Asian Americans in the correctional facilities. I don't know why. I know they commit crimes, but they just don't be there. So I always wondered about how one population cannot be there, and you see another population that's there, and the things that's allowed to go on in jail, the fightings, the shank makings,
the rape,
the contraband that's being sold, it's getting there, so it's a huge thing that I know it's a lot to unravel.
And working in the system, I think, can be dangerous too, because you get used to being that cog in the wheel. I think a lot of people who work in the system every day that are true believers and really want to fight the system and do everything they can get sucked up into it too. It's funny. I give you an example of a jury trial I once did. And, what's the big issue? I would argue that being on a jury is more important than voting, because you have someone's liberty and freedom at stake, and it's most likely a black person. I'll never forget, there were 3 African-American potential jurors, and I clearly saw that they were trying to get out of jury duty. There's ways to answer the question in a way that makes you look biased so that they're going to kick you off the jury. Well, they did these things. They answered the question in a certain way. They clearly said that they didn't want to be on the jury, and they all got kicked off. So when it was time to dismiss all these people, it was all black people that were getting dismissed. And they're looking around like, what the heck just happened? And I wanted to tell them, like, you just happened. You all got yourself off. This black man his life is on the line, and you took yourself off because you didn't want to sit for a jury for a couple of days. So there's all these like pieces within the system that we don't even recognize. It's weird if you think about anyone's daily life. How many crimes do you think we all commit every day? I mean, traffic violations. Everyone commits them every single day.
It's about 10.
You park. There's still laws, and I'm not saying these are criminal laws. There's still laws on the books that says you cannot exit out of your vehicle on the street side. You got to actually get on the curb side. There's all these. We are so overlawed, so to speak. Excuse the term, but there's so many things that can be a crime or at least a violation of the law. And I always ask the question: why are certain things being prosecuted and others not? I think the answer is very clear because it comes back to our historical standpoint. But people even within the system, they say, well, this person committed a crime. You got to do something about it. And I always say, why do I have to do anything about it? Like prostitution, still a crime. And they're arresting people every single day off the street. Well, we're giving them deferred prosecution. Instead of a felony, now it's a misdemeanor. Why are you arresting them at all? And you don't arrest certain prostitutes. You know what I'm saying? So it's just the laws are on the books to give the prosecutors and the cops and the law enforcement the discretion to get certain people.
Black people,
without doubt. If you're on an Indian reservation, it's Native Americans.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? It's who they want to oppress, and those are obviously the two categories in this country.
So one of the things I know you had a very great platform. Talk about some of the things that you would like to see implemented. We got bond reform and different things like that. But some of those other hot button issues that nobody really think about that we can possibly do and change the system.
Yeah, I mean, bond reform is a big one. Look, we got to stop the drug war. And marijuana is an easy one. People say, well, people are going to start using it. They're going to get addicted. And with all due respect, if people are going to get addicted, why does the criminal justice system have to get involved? You look at Portugal. They have legalized every drug. They have the lowest level of addiction rate in the world. Vancouver in Canada, they're having heroin clinics where it can be monitored by a doctor. So what do we have? We have the opioid crisis, right? Well, that's now a crisis. That's now a public health crisis. Why? Because white people are getting affected by it. And you know what? Racism has allowed us to actually get the right answer in this regard, because we actually look at it as public health as opposed to a criminal sense. So we all know the 80s, the crack epidemic, right? When it was a crack epidemic and black people were being affected by it, what do? We throw them all in jail. Yeah. So now you've gotten people addicted to drugs. You've then incarcerated them. I mean, think of the decimation of the community. You don't need to think about it. You know it, right? The decimation of the communities, at the very least, a double-edged sword. It's actually a triple-edged sword. What'd you do? You get people addicted. Then you incarcerate people. Then you lead to violence because people are fighting over the drugs. I promise you, if you legalize all drugs, honestly, tomorrow, you would cut about half the violence because no one would have the funds to pay that. It's all the underground market that is funding people when it comes to guns. People always talk about gun control. Like, take the money away from the people buying the guns. They won't be able to purchase a gun.
You said something very interesting about the opioid crisis, epidemic, whatever you like to look at it. And I'm going to speak from the perspective of African American. Many African Americans do not feel sympathetic to the opioid crisis because we see Becky and Josh coming into our communities, and I am living witness how it decimated a family within my family structure, where my sister, I tried to get her treatment. She got caught with one bag. She sat in jail. I should have got a lawyer. I didn't get a lawyer. I found the treatment facility and I pleaded with the judge to give her treatment. And he chose to give her a year in jail. And the worst president in the books, in my opinion, Ronald Reagan, who put this epidemic in place. And, he had a history of just, I remember, and I was very young when this Lebanese Liberation Army.
Symbionese, with Patty Hearst,
right? Yeah. And they wanted funds and food to feed the community. He said, "Well, poison the food," and they say, "Reagan, you can't do that." He's like,
"Yep."
And now I'm just thinking about that. Oliver North is about to be the president of NRA. Reagan, Oliver North, the Iran-Contra, crack pandemic in the black community.
Where do you announce his presidential run? A little trivia for you.
Let me see. Was it downstate Illinois?
No, Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
Where the 3 civil rights workers were murdered.
Yeah,
he knew exactly what he was doing. The South will rise again. Ketchup is a vegetable. The welfare queen. The man knew exactly, and I agree with the sentiment.
Terrible,
horrible, and he knew exactly what he was doing. Here's the thing: like, if you're wealthy, and particularly if you're wealthy and you're white, and a loved one gets addicted to opioids, crack, or whatever it is, you send them to the Betty Ford Clinic. You know instinctively you're not going to send them to jail. You're not going to put them in the system, the criminal justice, because nothing good comes of it. And people have been trained that that's the way. Oh, let's send them in jail. Well, what have you done? Even if they get treatment in the jail, you've now incarcerated this person. You've now given them a conviction. You've now taken them out of society for whatever number of months or years or whatever. You've done nothing. You've done absolutely nothing. What we know about addiction is that it's a disease. It's a condition that needs to be treated. And the reality is, if you're addicted, you really can't get treatment until you're ready for that treatment. So sticking them in jail is not, it'll clean them up, assuming they don't get anything, contraband coming in through the jail. It'll clean them up for that period of time, but that's not fixing the problem. You need treatment. So the rich people know instinctively that they would never send their kid to jail, their loved one to jail. But for some reason, that's the view. That's right. The view for poor black people.
It's a case that just was filed, a lawsuit that was just filed here recently against a hospital in Geneva that was they're claiming and saying that they got this lady addicted to painkillers. She subsequently died, and her family is suing the hospital. I think it's a good move, and maybe we can get some reform from this, but it would take cases like that to kind of open the eyes of society. It has to be that.
But here's you raise a fascinating point. It's a collateral consequence of the war on drugs. So in the opioid situation, people are getting addicted. These drugs are legal. No one is saying that make opioids illegal. No one is saying we shouldn't be given prescriptions for painkillers. We certainly want to get away from that because it's not the best drug, and doctors overprescribe it. But this person now has the ability to sue the doctor, to sue the manufacturer, to sue the big pharma company that provides it if they're doing something improper. She can get compensated for the addiction that was caused. You get addicted to heroin or crack, who you suing? You suing the dude on the street that gave it to you. Now, what did they do? They created a crime that says the illegal transfer, like it's basically a homicide charge. Someone can actually get charged with murder if you provide drugs to someone and that drug leads to the death of someone. But the big pharma doesn't get charged with murder.
If that drug leads to the death of a culturally other person, yes, you will be charged with a crime. But if it leads to the death of a person that looks like me, it's just one less person on the street.
Yeah. But you see how they approach it differently. When it's black people, it's criminal. It's dealt with in a criminal manner. That's the only way society believes they could deal with black people. Throw them in jail and incarcerate them. But with white people, it's you have the opportunity to sue. It's a public health crisis. Let's give them treatment, all that stuff. I mean, if there's ever an obvious difference of how people are treated, I mean, this is a clear one.
Again, I ain't gonna toot your horn too much, but one of the things is that you get it, and I think it takes individuals like you to be vocal and speak about it, because me vocal is just me being vocal. But when you have a person like yourself, lawyer, been in the trenches, know the ropes, know the law, and you can see, you know, maybe others can see, them hearing it from me, they're not going to hear it.
Yeah, well, that's a problem of black voices being disregarded. Period. And my voice is only accepted to a certain degree. But once they hear what I'm saying, there's a little distance. But the thing is like, fact check me. Like everything I'm saying, this is, if the evidence and the history led me in a different direction, I would go in that direction. This is really obvious. We will look at it, and this is what I said on the campaign trail over and over again. Tomorrow, a week from now, years from now, decades from now, we're going to see the drug war in particular as one of the worst domestic policies in the last 40, 50 years. And it's probably unfair to say it's the worst domestic policy, because that, sort of implies that we did it on accident, like we just made a mistake. But we know the intent. Who was it? Maxine Waters that says we didn't have the planes, trains, or automobiles to get the drugs into our community. How in the world did they get? That's another history lesson, right? You look at how the illicit drug trade came about and came into the black community is when the Black Panthers and when all these movements were really, white people were scared.
They had
J. Edgar Hoover was scared.
They had to neutralize it. And this was the way to neutralize it.
Yep.
They had to neutralize the black movement. And from that, we have been fragmented ever since, through politics, through policies, through economic development, and so many other things. Again, I just remember when I was a kid under the Carter administration and how funds was readily available for individuals to go to school, to get trades and different things like that. They took the trades out of school. They closed Washburn up, different things like that. And then we had this huge movement with Reagan, when he
did Gil Scott Heron, Reagan. Right?
Yeah, Reagan. he just and then we seen our communities really shift. You think about that, and it's devastated. It's devastated the black community.
You hate to assign the word genius to it, but it is evil genius. What I think the powers that be realize was you can't go in here and actively destroy these movements. You can't like declare war publicly, right? And go in there with the National Guard and just shoot and arrest people. You have to have, as we say in the law, pretext. And the war on drugs was the evil genius pretext, because now you get people addicted, so that takes over a portion. Now you create this illicit market, which creates a turf war, which gets rid of another portion. Then you allow the police to have the pretext to go into the communities and wage war on the communities. So now people are getting arrested because they got, a dime bag on them because they were selling or whatever it is, or truthfully or untruthfully, it doesn't matter. And now you've decimated the entire community.
Yeah, we had, I'm just thinking back, we had 3 presidencies that was the basis of their platform. You had Daddy Bush, son Bush, and Bill Clinton. Yep. That was the basis. Bill just changed the wording a little bit, but he gave us 3 strikes.
What was the super predators?
Yes.
What was that term?
Yes.
That was a little beyond drugs, but that was the idea, to fear the black man.
Right.
And create that fear. So now it's all coded language. They're not going to say you need to fear black people, right? They obviously can't say that anymore. But they could use super predators. They could use thugs. They could use welfare queens in a different context. It's all code to remind the voting public, white people, like, okay, this is what we need to fear. And that fear then turns into votes, then turns into policy, and turns in to oppression.
And just, bringing it all back, with the topic of this show, policy matters. You think about it. We have to find a way to impact policies that change our societal ills in a way that we can make people better. One of the things my mother always taught me, you leave people better than you met them. If I ain't learned nothing, if I can do that, damn, profound. I'd be a great person.
That's our mission, I think, in the world, is to make it better than where it started when we got on this earth. And I do think one problem we're really having on these policies is we're sort of blindly reaching on the edges, and a lot of that reason, I think, is because we just failed to recognize history. I mean, I think at the very least, what South Africa did, the Truth and Reconciliation. Now, you could debate whether, like, people who tell the truth about the oppression that was happening, should they be given, a free ride? We could debate that, but they at least dealt with it. You look at Germany after World War II, they dealt with it. I mean, they said, like, Nazism, you are done. The Nazi Party will never be. If you go to Germany, you see a reminder every other block of the Holocaust. And Germany has become one of the more progressive societies in our world. The United States never did that. They just there was never like a reckoning, of what genocidal policies that this country had, and in essence, because the genocide was just changing form. And I think even today, you have to just look at, let's acknowledge some truth.
And that's the key. If you want to fix any situation, you first got to acknowledge that you was wrong or you did something wrong. That's the biggest problem. They're not going to admit that these policies was systematic racism in their greatest form.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe we can get some inch by inch progress if we never acknowledge it, but we're never really going to get to the root of the problem and fix these ills if we don't acknowledge. You have to go. If you don't want to go to slavery, fine, go 30 years ago. Go with the the war on drugs, so to speak. Go on, what I always quote Nixon, who's on tape, specifically saying the war on drugs is to get rid of black people. Like, I mean, no better confession can be obtained than a U.S. president knowing exactly what he was doing. So look, there's plenty of proof, but we don't have that acknowledgement of the truth, and until we do that, I don't think we're going to hit the core of the issue.
And you're right. And so we got a race coming up, and everybody's jumping into the race, and they're we're talking about the mayor's race that's coming up, but what's missing out of that? Nobody is talking about policies. Nobody is talking about how will we fix the problems that this city, because Chicago dictates the pace for a lot of places, not just the state. We're on the global market. You the mayor of Chicago, you one of the top mayors in the country, right? Nobody in this race, as of date, has said anything about policy. I know Willie Wilson did some bail reform, and that's great. He has been doing great work, and I commend him for that. But other than that, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple, potential reasons. I don't know the answer. I mean, one reason is, has anyone really gotten the exposure yet to lay out their platform? The other potential reason is they haven't, and maybe they're being, how should I say, cautious to wait to see what are the issues. Maybe they're poll testing, which I don't think is a good idea, because look, if you poll test anything, what the majority of people are going to say is crime, crime, crime. And that leads us to the same result that we get to, which is, Bruce Rauner now wants the death penalty back. And there's a completely fraudulent bill out there in the House of Representatives in Illinois, where they're trying to change the possession of stolen motor vehicle law. They're trying to link it to vehicle hijacking. It's a completely fraudulent thing. They're just trying to incarcerate more people. So anytime the issue of crime is raised as the number one concern, I'm fearful that we're going to lose on criminal justice reform. So are they poll testing? Are they just being cautious? Are they just not given the platform yet? Maybe there are some people out there that are saying a lot. We just haven't been covered of them. I'm hopeful that it's they just haven't been covered yet, but that's fearful as well, because if they haven't been covered, when are they ever going to be covered? And Emmanuel's got the money.
Yeah, Vallis called for more cops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's Mr. Board of Education. He decimated our schools, so that makes sense, right? Because if you kick everyone out of school and you have this education reform, then you got to incarcerate everyone that you kicked out of school. So okay, we could put Vallis in that category. We know what Gary McCarthy is, right? I mean, he's going to be cops. In fact, he basically said that the Laquan McDonald shooting was justified. So put him in that category. Emmanuel is going to stay out of it and until he feels challenged. And then he just raised over $5 million in the last 2 months because Willie Wilson.
Because he busted caps.
Why? Let's talk real here.
Yeah. Because I have my own personal. Well, I'm gonna say it. He busted caps. The only reason to bust the caps is to support an incumbent who has the money. It was no reason to bust the caps. You can go under the threshold and fly under the threshold for a long period of time. But if you bust the cap, you support the individual who has the money to just free fall. It was the worst thing.
There's no other plausible answer than that. Because here's the thing, $100,000 is the minimum to bust the caps. We don't even know what the ballot is, which is a crazy portion of the law. How someone could bust the caps in May. It was actually April, I think he busted them. How he can bust them in April, because that basically, the law is this huge loophole. I could say, you know what, I'm running for mayor. I'm going to put $100,000 in, and then I'll never run. And then I just gave Emmanuel, who's got all these corporate friends, it made no sense at all, other than to benefit the richest guy in the neighborhood, which is Emmanuel. I can't think. I mean, unless it's just the dumbest thing ever, and he's not thinking. But for all we know, he may not even run, or he may not even get in the ballot.
You know what? I have had the experience of orchestrating a mayor's race and getting 12-5 in the city of Chicago. Good is a hard thing to do, because you need 12-5 to get on the ballot, but in all actuality you need 30.
And because you can't in the municipal race, you and I can't sign
twice.
So I can't sign for two candidates, which is a silly rule as well. But so this isn't just 12-5. This is 12-5 independent of 9 other people.
Very much so. It's a hard task to do. It's very hard. Many people, even I do believe some of the candidates, unless you have a good structure behind you, they really don't understand that is a hard task. And it supports the incumbent. It supports the machine. The Daley administration was able to orchestrate this, to put this in there. That's how he was able to stay in there all this time. But it's a hard task to go about. So, I'm not concerned that we would dwindle down when this come September or something like that. People be dropping off like flies.
Yeah.
However, I just think we have a task ahead of us, and if we're looking for reform with these policies, we're going to have to take out some people.
I mean, the one positive is that there is an instant runoff. So at least, we can potentially get it to a runoff, and then someone has the opportunity to go head to head with, I'm assuming, Rahm Emanuel. If you think about it, this is why I'm so convinced that Rahm Emanuel knew exactly what he was doing with the Laquan McDonald video, because it was almost timed perfectly. the release of it from his perspective, because who's talking about Laquan McDonald now? 2 years ago, that was the talk of the town, and Rahm Emanuel's dead. Now he can't be beat.
He was very clear on what he was doing. I know it was a cover-up. During the height of the election, during the runoff at that time. And if you go back and read the transcripts and what was going on, and this is documented facts. It's just not just Rahm. And I'm going to throw it out there because, we love us some Obama, but he was contacted by the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch. Rahm sent somebody down there to brief them on the Laquan McDonald. And if they breached Loretta breached Obama, and it still didn't come out until it was pushed out by activists.
Yeah.
So it was just not a cover up in the Chicago area. Blacks love Obama. They love Obama. Best thing since government cheese. But I know from a fact, I know that he had to be briefed on that. He had to be briefed. And they chose to cover it up and keep it quiet until he got reelected,
And let it out with enough time.
Black people don't matter.
There's two potential things that can hopefully change in a way that you wouldn't expect. Number one, the trial of the murder of Laquan is coming up pretty soon. And my understanding is it's sort of late summer. And this judge is a pretty no-nonsense kind of guy. He doesn't give continuances, so most likely it's going to go. So that could be in the public spotlight. And who knows what the defense will say. Does Rahm stuff come up in that trial? So that's one potential thing that can blow things up. Another thing in an ironic sense, and I'm curious if McCarthy's going to go forward with his candidacy, but let's say he does. Does he say, when the pressure comes on him about Laquan McDonald, does he say, you know what? I watched that video with the mayor.
Well, he had already said that he was aware of it 2 days afterwards, and he gave the information to the mayor, and the mayor is continuously saying that he didn't see the video. However, I've seen the video. I've seen the autopsy report. I look at them from time to time, and they killed that. They murdered that kid.
But what if? Look, if McCarthy. To me, McCarthy is going forward with a very simple plan. Can he get 25% on a law enforcement platform? You can code that however you want, right? So he's going to appeal to the cops and to the predominantly white North and Northwest side. Can he
Trump
slice?
Voters.
Yeah, Trump voters. It's a municipal election, nonpartisan, so Republicans vote just as much as Dems, and Chicago isn't full of Republicans, but there's enough to maybe get to second place. Does he? So he's going to get that. So why does he? He doesn't have to go on the platform that what happened to McDonald was bad. He can go full-fledged pro-cop, right? And if he does that, is he willing to say what Emanuel really knew? And maybe it doesn't help him, but maybe it helps some up and comer to blow it up, because that's what you got to do. You got to attack the lead dog.
I think it'd be very interesting. I just hope that we can see some policies come out of this, and somebody that's really pushing some true change that the city needs. If you look through the south and the west sides of Chicago, they look the exact same that they looked in 68.
Yeah, since the riots.
And we need change, that systematic change in those communities, and that will stop the killing. That'll stop the violence. The schools will be flourishing. The mental health clinics need to come back. All these things I often call Rahm a Republicrat.
Yeah.
That's, in my book, he's a Republican.
There's no doubt. He's a corporate Republican. He's got, socially some progressive views, but yeah, he's with the moneyed interests, which is to me what Republicans should be. Now the Dems have sort of taken over that mantle as well. But you're absolutely right. No one's talking about, I mean, the systemic forcing out of black people in Chicago. I mean, I don't see what else to call it. You shut down 50 schools. What is your goal? Your goal is to maintain a upper middle class, predominantly white city. And the more he can kick out black folk, I think that serves his interest, and he's doing it.
I just even look in my own community. Me and my wife was the last black family on my block to buy a home. 5 years. Since then, there has not been a black family to buy a home. And I do believe it's been 4 or 5 homes on that block that sold. None was black. And I was like, wow, this is kind of sad. If you think about it, the projection of the structure of the black family and we're not there anymore. Yeah. We're leaving.
Well, then you had the violence, and there's really been no move one way or the other to curb it. And you do have to think like, well, maybe they want it that way. Because at some point, which is being bore out right now, people are going to leave the community. Like they just, look, I want to walk to the grocery store or the school or wherever I'm going to and not worry about getting shot. Do they just give up and leave, which is the exodus is occurring. So if you're in a position of power, how that isn't number one priority to fix it, or maybe it's the number one priority is to not fix it. And people say, conspiracy theory, all that stuff. But the facts that, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we have this exodus. We have these issues. Nothing is being done to fix it. He promised to fix it. He hasn't done anything about it. But, you go to the affluent areas. It's amazing.
I was at a Cubs game last week, and I actually took the bus. I said, wow, I'm going to take the bus. I hadn't been on public transportation in quite some time. However, it was a different society. Yeah. It was a different society. Everything was free flowing. People was in and out, and they was hustling, bustling. They was walking around freely. And, when I got to a certain place and the destination, and I got off the bus and I looked behind me. I checked my surroundings. I was like, damn. But these people got off the bus and they walked home. When I got off the bus, I looked around. Yeah. It's just amazing. I always, it's so many problems and it's so close to so many things to tackle. So what can we see from you next?
It's the question of my day all the time. Honestly, I don't know. I run for public office to effectuate that change and to put forward those policies. And that's all I want to do. It's not for glory. It's definitely not for money, because I keep losing money in these ventures. But, that's all I want to do. So whatever opportunity I get to do that, and it's the right opportunity, I will take that opportunity. In the meantime, if I'm not running for public office, I'm going to be speaking the truth, fighting for the underdog every single day. But here's the thing. I mean, I think not so much what's next for me, but what's next for all of us, and forming these organizations, these actually true organizations. The fake stuff has got to go. Nothing worse than claiming to be something, and that's, you're not that. Especially if you claim to be for black folk, or you claim to be for justice and equality, and you're really not. We need a true organization that can stand up, and be true, and raise some money so we can actually have some power, and do it. I don't know how to do it, but that's what I'd like to see, because I'm really discouraged with these faux aggressives.
You hit the head on the nail. I think you said faux aggressive. I look at some of the progressive organizations, and they endorse machine candidates, and I'm like, wow, how could you call yourself progressive if you endorsing the problem?
Yeah, in every sort of element, like if it's a if it's criminal justice reform, if it's the anti-racism, whatever it is, that structure, you want it to be so true because you want it to stay true to its beliefs. And as it gets popular, which is a good thing because you want it to grow and you want the movement to grow, how do you prevent that element from coming in and taking it over and co-opting? I mean, it's an age-old question throughout history, really. The favorite groups that I love, the Black Panthers, same problem. That was government forces. That was, it's just over and over. How do you maintain? In some organizations, they just die out. They're just not effective. But they're true believers. There's never a question of their true belief in their values. They just could never get moving. And then other organizations, they just sell out quicker than you could say sell out. And that's what we got to be concerned with, because you look, bring it back to the mayoral race. Rahm Emanuel is turning himself into something that he clearly isn't. And are we going to be the people? Are we going to be fooled to get bamboozled? At some point, I'm definitely not a conservative, and the whole personal responsibility to me is a myth. But at some point, us as voters, do your job. If every single voter actually just spent 2 hours of researching, because even the unfunded candidates, they have websites. You could Google someone's name and you could find out about them. Why? Come on, just do some research.
I think civic engagement is very key. They took out civics in the community, in the schools, and that's a big part of it. That's why we don't have that voting block of millennials. They just checked out. It ain't working for them. So they, they check out.
I don't think that's a fair excuse, because my feeling is there's an argument to be made that voting isn't very beneficial. But my feeling is what else are you going to do? It takes 2 seconds. In no way is voting the silver bullet to all our problems. In no way is electoral politics going to fix everything. But to the extent that it can fix some things, why wouldn't you engage? Unless if everyone wants to say we're going to actively boycott it as some theory that's somehow going to make a change, I'll listen. But until we do that, why not? I was watching a documentary on Robert Kennedy, and he talked about how the word idiot comes from I think the Greek word idios or something. Mm-hmm. I'm probably getting this wrong, but it basically means not to be involved in politics. So that's he liked the original, the origination of idiot. Be involved. Don't be an idiot.
Aaron, I thank you. And again, we always have a spirited conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And, next week we should have another interesting guest. So tune in next week at 6:00 here on Policy Matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.